To our Tuesday, May 4th, for agenda session, and now start.
Should be good.
We're still not on the big on our screen. Is it showing up on the big screen up front?
It is up there. Yes, sir.
It's up there?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear?
All right, here's Tony.
Mr. Sammons, this is a very unusual way of doing business. It's my understanding through our new
I had to start the video and make the camera come on because it wasn't starting on Zoom.
I think to get some direction from council this afternoon about our purchase
I
items.
need to mute the system sounds with the rest of everything.
Yes, it's talking with the city
Then I
attorney.
had to connect to
The request
Then
that
change the
council
name.
has is
change the current name to council.
acceptable if we can have more specifics to what the request is or what council is seeking from the potential vendor, and then we can move forward. And as the
That's
city
okay.
attorney
We
and I
keep
were
our sound on.
speaking
They have
earlier,
to. So if it sounds like somebody with
what we have pretty much was just a draft of what was looking to be procured, what services, and we just need to get specifics and we'd be able to move forward.
Are we talking about the UTC? Or I thought, it was my understanding we were talking about tonight's purchases.
Oh, okay.
I was going to hear your question, so I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was speaking in reference to
Actually ran over. So I didn't know how fast.
Okay, we're going to discuss that there in budget comments.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's my understanding that this afternoon you needed some direction
Good.
on the purchase items that we would be addressing tonight.
the purchase items tonight. Those items are okay. The only thing that we had for us to bring to the council's attention, there was one recommended for approval, a competitive seal proposal instead of a seal bid, which was coming from Public Works, the Management Division, and they're seeking an RFP request to secure fuel management and operation fuel card program.
Yes, Tony, that's right, the RFP, I think is the RFP section, I think is what Chairman is looking for.
Yes, that's the only request that's seeking council's approval. There are different options. There are various options that are available to remotely operate stations and the monitor of the fuel levels. And this will elevate the best operations for the systems. That's why they're seeking this to for vehicles and managing the calendars that are installed per visit of the vehicles. And we could probably bring on Bill Payne to get more detailed information if needed.
This over, so it's difficult for me to hear and understand what he's saying now. if Mr. Salmon's needing something from this council at this point in time, before we look at purchases this afternoon? Is he looking for some direction from this council now or this afternoon?
No, sir, it's just related to the
No, it's just a
RFP.
reporting. It's just a reporting.
Okay, all right. It was my understanding from our meeting this morning that he needed some direction from the council before 6 o'clock this afternoon. But if that's not the case, then we'll move on.
It's just a reporting
Okay, all
for the RFP submitting process.
right. Oh, yes,
Yes,
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you. Related to the purchasing documents, now that we're trying out this new format, I would appreciate it if the emergency purchases, we could add a column that would allow us to see at a glance the cost not to exceed. So that we would be able to see very quickly, for example, that the meals, for example, are not to exceed $36,000. So just help in the evaluation of all of this.
We can make that.
Thank you. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions really revolve around the emergency purchases as well. And just really what we don't see on here, we see an event type. I don't know what we're supposed to relate that to, if that is the same as the fund in which the money is coming out of. Anybody know the answer, Maura? Joe, either of you know the answer to that? The first item on here is an extended emergency purchase for food for displaced residents at Patton Towers. And the event type is COVID. I'm just wondering, did that come from our COVID relief fund or did that come from a different?
I'm actually not sure. Do you know? Okay. Thank you. It's listed as COVID because it is related to the emergency order of the mayor related to COVID. So it's the funds right now are coming from contingency to make these payments. We may be able to get some reimbursement through some different HUD-related dollars, but we're not sure yet.
Do we expect another one of these or is this?
We do. Folks will not be moving back into Patton Towers until later this month and then into June perhaps. So it's just a long protracted repair that has to be done at the building. So we are still continuing to help offset needs and support for residents.
Will it be an emergency purchase moving forward more since we are anticipating it?
They're emergency purchases because we just don't know the timing until the timing is right upon us. So that's why they're still listed as emergency purchases.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions regarding our purchases for this afternoon? We have no departmental report at this time. So that concludes our agenda part of the session. We will now move into Public Works and Transportation Committee. Can I get approval of the minutes from the last meeting?
Second.
With no objection, the minutes will stand as reported. Madam Clerk, item 5B is second reading. Is there any questions concerning? We'll now move to next week. I'll tell you what, Madam Clerk, would you go ahead and bring in Bill Payne, please, for me? Mr. Payne, we're going over now our ordinances for next week. Madam Clerk, if you would, for next week, May 11th, please read 60, please.
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 31, Sewage, Maintenance, and Drainage of Article 8, Stormwater Management Division 7, fees, section 31, 356.1. Adjustments in quality fee related to water quality reductions.
Questions, comments on this ordinance? There's a reduction of fees. Madam Clerk, 7L, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator of the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 3 final for Hazen and Sawyer relative to contract number W14-006-101, moccasin vent, WWTP, secondary clarifier upgrades, a constant decree project for a decreased amount of $9,340 for a revised contract amount not to exceed $2,024,550.
Questions, comments? None. 7M, please.
A resolution to rescind resolution number 30604 for the award of contract number R20-017-210, Summit of Softball Complex improvements from the Easter Tornado 2020, shade structure replacements to Limit Lands, Inc., doing business as Corp Cat of Carlton, Georgia, and rebate said project.
No hands. N.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 final with NAPCO Electric Company, Inc., the contract number W20-04201, Storm Station 1 replacement of motor control center for an increased amount of $11,712.95, as a release of remaining contingency amount of $41,937.05. Revised contract amount of $148,122.95.
Questions? 7O, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number R20-017-216, roofing repairs for Summit of Softball Ball Fields rebid to Tri-State Roofing Contractors LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee, for a contract amount of $83,360, as a contingency amount of $8,500, for an amount not to exceed $91,860.
See no hands. P, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number E19-011202, blanket contract for roofing inspections, repairs, and maintenance to both vendors, Potter Roofing Contractors, Inc. of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Tri-State Roofing Contractors, LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee, for year 1 of a 3-year term in the amount of $150,000 annually for use by all departments.
7Q, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into contract for CMA 2035 with the Tennessee Department of Transportation for the maintenance of state highways within the city limits of Chattanooga for reimbursement to the city for an amount not to exceed $424,275.30.
No hands, questions, concerns? Mr. Payne, that was pretty painless. It's my understanding that we do have a report on our sewer consent decree this afternoon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We do have one prepared. I wanted to check though if the council is able to see the Zoom on their screens.
We see it on our laptop.
Okay. I wanted to be sure before Mike Marino with Jacobs is on the line, and we do have that presentation prepared. I know we have talked in the last few months about some specific items on the consent decree, but we did want to give an update on the overall progress of the consent decree. And so if we could, Mike Marino is available and can come in and is prepared to make that presentation.
Now we're up on the big screen. You're coming in now.
I am here.
I don't know what the problems are having because I just joined this. Oh.
All right. Council, we appreciate this opportunity. So we felt like a good overview on the consent decree would be appropriate, particularly with 3 new members on the council to be able to give them an update on where we are through phase 1 and as we're entering phase 2. And so Jacobs Engineering is the city's contracted program manager to help us essentially with some additional staff and resources that it takes in order to manage a program as large as the consent decree. And so they have been with us now for several years working through that process. Mike Marino is the program manager, and he's got a good overview presentation for that. So Mike, let you share your presentation and get started.
Sure. Let me get it working on my screen. Share. Let me get my text squared away. Does everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, you see the presentation mode? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, council members. I hope everybody is safe and well today. Like Bill said, my name is Mike Marino. I'm the program manager for the consent decree program, and I'll be delivering a consent decree update on behalf of Bill and Jeff Rose, who's the director of the Waste Resources Division. I'm going to run you through an overview real quick of the program, give you a quick status, talk about some of the solutions that are in place, talk about some of the results to date, talk about how we reach out to the community, and to discuss what's next. So we've had sewers in the city of Chattanooga for about 130 years now, the first being built in the 1890s. That picture to your right, built probably around that time. They're still in place and still in service. They're hand-laid brick. They are now lined, and these are part of your combined sewer system. We'll talk about that here in a minute. There's been lots of projects in place since 1890s, all leading up to the consent decree, which commenced in 2013, which is an infrastructure program to improve the sewer system under the watch of the Environmental Protection Agency. So a little bit about your system. That picture to your right is the Moccasin Bend Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's an updated picture. I think it's 2021. So it's 3 areas: your service area, which is your people and your geospatial locations, your networks, which is your collection system, your pipes, and then of course your treatment facility, which is your Moccasin Bend plant. Your area is about 505 square miles. It's about 400,000 people. However, those aren't the people that are all contributing to the sewer system. Most of those are on septic. About 182,000 people in the city of Chattanooga, all your retail customers, and you have about 9 regional customers, which are called satellite customers and or wholesale customers. One of them you probably know is the Hamilton County Wastewater Treatment Authority. These are folks that flow into your system and we treat their wastewater. Your system overall is about 1,263 miles of gravity pipe. You have about 30,000 manholes, and you have a combined sewer system. This is where the stormwater and the waste and the sanitary sewer systems are combined in the downtown area, about 70 miles of that, of the pipes about those sizes I showed you earlier. This was done prior to the EPA to save money and time and for flooding control. They're legal now. You're about 1 or 2 or 3 in the southeast. Then you have a large regional wastewater treatment plant. It's one of the largest in the southeast, and it can do about 230 million gallons a day of sanitary sewer treatment. So what is a consent decree? Well, we have a consent decree, which comes from the EPA, and it's because there's been an excess of overflows violating the city's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Permit, NPDES. They came down to inspect in 2010, 2011, and found that you were in violation. From that, the city negotiated what's called the consent decree, which is a large work plan to improve the sewer system over time, or there's penalties associated with that. You have this consent decree was lodged in April 24, 2013. It's in 2 phases, about 17 and a half years. First phase, 2013 to 20, which is completed. The time is completed. A couple of the projects are still going on. Phase 2, the next 10 years we've started. And the name of this program is called Clear Chattanooga. You may have seen some of the branding around town and on websites and in various other things. So what are the overall goals of this consent decree? Well, of course, total consent decree compliance, that we complete and submit all of our projects plans and task on time to the EPA without stipulated penalties. Thus far, we are in compliance. Reduce overall inflow and infiltration. This is stormwater that gets into unwanted stormwater that gets into the sanitary sewer pipes and takes up capacity in the system reserved for wastewater that can cause sanitary sewer overflows. 3, eliminate chronic sanitary sewer overflows in this system. There's about 13 of them. These are where there's more than 5 in this in one particular area within a year. And eliminate one egregious SSO, which is called West Bank. It's on the west bank of the Tennessee River near the Moccasin Bend Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a direct discharge into the Tennessee River. So we have a 5-point plan. First is to rehabilitate existing pipelines. We've already talked about the 1,263 miles of pipe, which is broken into about 105 mini basins in the geographic area of Chattanooga. I could show you that. Per the consent decree, we are to rehabilitate 30 of those. Rehabilitate or install new pump stations. Install equalization stations. These are storage systems to temporarily store dilute wastewater from storms into these systems and then release them back into the system when there's availability. Plan improvements to improve reliability and combined sewer overflow treatment facilities. You have about 8 of those to improve and maximize those facilities. So what does this cost? In phase 1, which is this 2013 to 2020, we're at 88% spent. Budget was about $280 million, and we've been funded for that, and we've contracted for that. We've spent about $253. We have a couple more projects that these projects are deemed phase 1, which should be completed in the next year. Phase 2 projects take us out to 2030. We're at 2% spent, and we have a budget of about $400 million. About $125 million of that has been funded thus far. And these projects will take us through the remaining projects, the consent decree required projects, and will hopefully put us in compliance. We're confident of that. So with that spend, the actual projects associated with that in phase 1, it's about 77 total projects and tasks. We've completed about 70 of those. About 5 of those are in construction still. Phase 2 projects, for the next 10 years. It's about 70 total projects. We have some that are in planning and studies and design and in construction, various phases. And the 35 conceptual there are projects that will be funded over that 10-year period. From a geospatial look, there's a satellite image of the city of Chattanooga. And here's how our projects are spaced out. These green areas are completed projects. Most of these projects right here are rehabilitation projects. That circle to the left is 12 projects at the wastewater treatment plant. Those smaller circles are pump stations. Those additional smaller circles are projects at the CSO treatment facilities. And we have sustainability projects per the consent decree. These orange projects are still projects in progress. The one in circle is the Ham Road Equalization Station, which is 30 million gallons worth of storage, which we'll talk about later. And then the projects in gray are phase 2 projects. A couple of these are ongoing and one's into the future. So SSOs are equally offending around the city of Chattanooga, and we have projects to capture and to mitigate the majority of them. Here's a complicated slide. This shows a heat map of where your chronic sanitary sewer overflows are. These must be eliminated per the city of Chattanooga and the consent decree, and they're around the city. If these things aren't solved, there could be potentially moratoriums. That is a bad word. And there are ways to manage that, which we're doing now. But the best way to manage it is to eliminate it. We have a solution for all of this. I'm not expecting you to read this, but these projects are in either conceptual all the way through construction. And however, the key piece here is that through the program, we've identified these and we provided solutions for all of them. And we're in the process of solving it. Some quick pictures of some of the work that we've done. This is at the plant. This is infrastructure of the thickeners. It's a process at the plant that's in rehabilitation. This is inside one of the equalization stations at Ham Road. This is a 10 million gallon storage tank. You can see the largeness of it. These are some pictures of some pump stations. The one to the left is in the DuPont area. It's under construction. And this one to the right is the Citico pump station along the Greenway, which has been completed. This is one of your CSO treatment facilities at Central Avenue that discharges into Chattanooga Creek. These systems are used when dilute sanitary and stormwater is in excess and they're diverted to these structures, there's some primary treatment, and then it's discharged into the creeks. They are permitted and legal. Here's some inside pictures of those facilities. These are just to show you some of the infrastructure around the city. This is one of our largest sustainability projects at 10 acres and 10,000 panels of solar panels. It's about 4 megawatts of renewable energy. It's about 10 to 12% of the plant energy. Here are some pictures of the, it's called cured in place pipeline rehabilitation. This is trenchless technique. We don't have to break up the streets to rehabilitate and line the pipes to fix leaky pipes and joints throughout the system. So I've shown you what the program is, an overview, where it is, what it costs. I'm going to show you how you measure it. So ultimately, we measure the flow in and out of these mini basins prior to the rehabilitation. And our goal is to get a 24 to 25% reduction. And you can see in this particular project, our first phase, which is the dark green, we were able to get 24. However, we needed more. We have some additional projects which will get us to a total of about 25%. So what I'm really trying to show you here is that we have flow monitoring in the city that captures the pre and post rehabilitation progress. And we're able to measure that and determine how we're doing. So another graph here is going to show you rainfall versus our actual reduction of volume of stormwater into the system. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen an increase of rain. It's raining pretty heavy today, about 31%. During that time frame, we've seen a reduction of actual SSO, sanitary sewer overflow volume. We're able to measure the volume through the system. It's largely through the work that we've done in the rehabilitation of our pipelines and our pump stations. But a lot of it has to do with this West Bank overflow, which we haven't had one in the last year. So management processes at the plant. However, with the online project coming online for the Ham Road equalization stations, we should solve that project completely. So you can see increased rainfall, decreased SSO volume reduction. However, that volume reduction doesn't completely transfer into reduction of sanitary sewer overflows. Last year, we had more than the year before. We had a lot of rain as well that year. So although we're reducing the amount coming into the system, it's not enough to completely reduce some of the sanitary sewer overflows in the system. The good news is that we have lots of projects identified and in planning and construction to solve these sanitary sewer overflows. Although the EPA is happy that we're reducing what they consider pollution into the navigable waterways, we still have more work to do in knocking out sanitary sewer overflows within the city. So part of what we do for the public is we have tours of our plants and of our projects. And we have community meetings to talk about our projects. And we're actually having public outreach right now with this meeting. This was one of the projects where we had the policemen, the firemen come out to the Ham Road storage facility. And there's some council members that were present there as well. And we gave a tour. We also have a website. This is what we call a storybook. It basically shows all of our construction projects in their various stages, a picture of it, where they are within the actual city of Chattanooga, and a picture of the infrastructure. It's updated once a quarter. We also have our Clear Chattanooga website, which is an interactive website, which has pictures and videos, and actually has an introduction from Jeff Rose, the director, and lots of other information there for you as well. What's next? Well, working through the final throes of COVID-19, hopefully, repercussions. Continue working on phase 2 projects and our Clear Chattanooga support program. Continue working on the SS elimination program. We're also working on the equalization station program, including something called E2I2, which is a collaboration with the Hamilton County WWTA in the geographical areas where we touch along the borders. Looking for an extension from EPA on some specifics of our program. And ultimately, we're going to be installing some other infrastructure programs as we go down the schedule. Well, that was a quick tour for me anyway. Hopefully, I didn't bore you too much. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about the consent decree. And I'll be happy to take any questions or give it over to Bill as you see fit.
All right, council, any questions for Mr. Moreno on the sewer consent decree? Mr. Payne, I'm not seeing any hands.
Well, thank you very much. I'll make one parting comment to the council, just to put some numbers to some of these terms of the amount of of inflow and infiltration, this unwanted stormwater that has been removed. It's so far from 2013 to 2021, it's estimated that it's about 1 billion gallons annually that has already been removed. And over the next 10 years, the estimated amount that will also be removed is another 1 billion gallons annually. So that's a significant amount of the treatment capacity at the plant. And so we know that you all are very concerned about where the ratepayer dollars have gone and are being used on this project. And so we wanted to make sure that you were aware of the impact that the dollars so far have gotten us and the direction that we have left to go. So we appreciate the council's time very much.
Okay, hold on, we do have some questions. Councilman Ludwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill, I just left the meeting with Senator Haggerty and a whole slew of folks talking about infrastructure. And of course, WWTA was there. Mr. Rhodes was there representing the city. Can you tell me a little bit more about the equalization state? That's a fun word to say. Equalization storage containers that we toured last year, and the projection, they could have been in the slide, I apologize if I missed something. Can you tell me a little bit more about when they are going to be online, and also with construction costs that was heavily mentioned in this meeting at this left, are we in danger of our budgeted amount, and will that have a significant impact? I'm guessing it will with future construction.
Certainly. Let's see, Mike, right there on that slide. So that is an aerial view of the three storage facilities at the Hom Road site that Mike has mentioned. Each one of those will hold 10 million gallons each, and so that's 30 million gallons at that particular location. There are additional sites which would have one or more of these 10 million gallon storage facilities that would be placed on them in either East Ridge or over on the eastern boundary over near Lee Highway. And I know some of those are some properties that are there. Those are joint projects that would be with the WWTA. Certainly the $400 million budget for phase 2 that was shown on the slide, based on current estimates and construction costs. We do have those included in that $400 million. However, certainly, construction costs are rising. We're all very concerned about, the increasing cost of construction materials. And so, that will certainly be something that we're watching, but currently those are included in the phase 2. Mike, I don't know if there's anything that I've missed.
Yeah,
that needs to be added.
They are. There is escalation in the financial model that we put forth. We've been fortunate for the last 8 years, and many of our projects are within the conceptual budgets, maybe a little bit over, but we were fortunate to be able to move forward. Rates have been raised for the city of Chattanooga. When you have a large infrastructure project like this, we've spaced ours out compared to other utilities that do it all at one shot. A little bit of wait and see if some of these prices are going to last, specifically with steel and some of these other things. So we'll know more as we go down. Some of this is just starting to hit now. Sometimes it's the availability of these contractors. We've been fortunate. I think the city is a great customer, and contractors see this. So that's the best we could do, is to put our foot forward. So if there is a point where the city will not be able to afford projects if it's so egregious that puts us way out of our budgets, and those decisions are made with Jeff and with Bill as the bids come in. Don't forget, these are competitive, and so these contractors do want to work. So
Good. I'm good, Chairman, for now. Thank
did
you.
I get your question, Darren? Sorry.
I think you got it.
Okay.
I've been studying this a little bit. I appreciate that.
Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mike, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but just specifically, my question really had to do with time. When we're going to start focusing on getting more of these tanks online, and then one in particular off of Adams Road. Do Bill, Mike, either one of you have a new timeline as to when we may start to see some construction begin on that?
Yeah.
That facility?
These particular ones right here, these are going to come online late summer. Okay, there's been some schedule pushback on them. Late summer is when they're scheduled to come online. So these are phase 1, 2, and 3. The Adams Road one is phase 6. That one has gone through some design revisions, and so it's still in design. We are hopeful to get that one into construction in calendar year FY22. Councilman Smith. So we do have, as we move through these type of infrastructure that are, in certain areas of the city, there's this juxtaposition of easements to get some of the pipelines installed. There's lots of pieces and parts to get it right. So we're pushing on all cylinders on this one and in the South Chick area, which is about fully designed, which should go to construction here in the next couple of months. And then the one that we've talked about, which is, we call this E2I2. It's an acronym for, Bill, you may know off the top of your head. It's one, we collaborate with the Hamilton County, and that's going to be in the Lee Highway area, in the Red Bank area, and in the East Ridge area. And those, we're working on a different type of construction for those. We're working through Bill to see how we're going to get that one going. That one could be started probably within the next 8 months as well. So, we can, at another time, we can show a full schedule if you'd like at the pleasure of Bill and yourself.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilor, I do want you to have your questions answered. Just a reminder, we do have 3 more committee meetings for the second one. Councilwoman Hill.
Question, I'm wondering about the kind of staffing we're going to need to plan for over the next decade as these new facilities come online.
Certainly, and thank you, Councilwoman, for that. There are 2 components to that, and first is the staffing that it takes in order to be able to implement these projects and bring them online. That is one reason that we hired on Jacobs initially in order to be able to get us up to speed quickly. They also assisted us as we were negotiating the consent decree itself in terms of making sure that we had the right solutions, and we're not going to be installing infrastructure and projects that were not needed. That has always been intended to be a temporary, essentially extension of our staff, and it is something that will begin to taper down. There has been some staffing increase, and that's already occurring. However, some of those things will change. A lot of what we will see going forward after the consent decree ends and as we go through phase 2 is really going to be focused on maintenance and making sure that we're properly operating and properly maintaining the system. That is really the biggest piece going forward. Once we get the capacity piece, which is all of these projects that we've been talking about, so far today are all about either eliminating the I&I problems, increasing the reliability of the system, or increasing the capacity, the treatment capacity. So we're doing all those things in order to be able to reduce and eliminate overflows everywhere that we can going forward, making sure that the system stays clean, stays maintained, that all of our mechanical systems operate and function properly, electrical systems, sensors, controls and whatnot all continue to operate properly. That is an additional piece, and EPA uses an acronym called CMOM, which stands for Capacity Management, Operation, and Maintenance. So we are working on all of those simultaneously. We will get to a place where, and there is a capacity assurance program which is used for new development to be sure that we have capacity in the system for proposed development before they come online, so that we don't create problems with new development. And then of course the management side, and then this operations and maintenance piece. So all of those are going forward, and those are going to be the critical components for us.
My question really is, looking at these storage tanks, for example, how many people need to be on site at those storage tanks on a daily basis. Are these self-managing, but we are doing maintenance?
Yes.
of them regularly, or do they each have staff that we added?
I could jump in, Bill.
Go ahead.
Yeah, these are remotely operated. And so they're operated through your SCADA system, which is your control system, which the city is embarking on improving that. There is checkups, right? That pump station plant may once every 2 days to check on things, but everything's operated remotely and automatically.
Thank you very much.
And just to add to that, there is a centralized control center at the treatment plant, and so these systems would be similar to the 79 pump stations that Mike alluded to earlier that are in the system. Those are also remotely operated and managed through controls, and then staff are sent to them as needed for maintenance or adjustments, or if sensors indicate that there's something that needs to be physically looked at as well. And that would be the same with these, where we would be able to view them and provide controls remotely.
Yeah, I built. Sure. And I'm sorry to jump in. Just one last thing, along with Bill was saying, is that the key thing here about the consent decree is that our goal is to close out the consent decree. Right now, legally, and Phil could attest to this, you're under the auspices of the consent decree. So they're in your business. They tell you what to do with your sewer system until we close it out. Now, we do have ways to manage that, but they still have to sign off on the work that we're doing. And we do have progress reports, and all of this stuff is very transparent. That is my main goal, is to get you out from underneath their thumb, close it out.
Goal as well. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, you can excuse our guest. Take the screen down. Now moving to transportation this afternoon. Both of these, one ordinance, one resolution, was covered in our meeting 2 weeks ago. Just Councilwoman Donnelly, any questions or comments about either item 6A or 7C?
Yes, for 6A, after review of this request, I'm going to agree with Steve and I intend to deny this request.
All right, very well. Thank you very much. All right, any other questions or comments regarding either one of these items? If not, that will conclude Public Works and Transportation Committee. We will now adjourn that and go to Public Safety Committee. So now call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion on the bench, please? We have a motion, proper second to approve. There's no objection from the council. The minutes will stand as recorded. We have two resolutions we need to cover before we go into the quarterly report. Madam Clerk, if you would, for next week, May the 11th, 7J, please.
A resolution authorizing the chief of police to apply for and award and accept FEMA fiscal year 2021 Port Security Grant Program funds to be used by CPD Utility Unit to purchase 2 X-ray machines, 2 flat panel imagery, 2 computer kits with tablets, 2 tripods, and 2 robotic X-ray frames with a 25% city match from the EOD NRC fund in the amount of $34,356.83 for an amount not to exceed $137,400.
Any questions about this grant program? That's over here.
What are the police going to do with X-ray machines?
We have a gentleman that can answer that question. Let's give us a Chief, you want to answer, please?
Good afternoon, Council.
Yes, ma'am.
In answer to the question, just about any time you see any request for equipment that has to do with an X-ray machine or anything like that, it's going to be our explosive ordnance disposal. So they use that in what's called a record safe procedure. So it's not to make light, but we don't go up and cut the red or green wire. We just see what's inside the box and then probably blow it up from a long way away so nobody it's hurt, but we use the X-ray to determine what's inside the backpack of the fox, and the item of concern, helps identify it, and it lets the bomb squad know. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding 7J? Not Madam Clerk, 7K, please.
A resolution authorizing the chief of police to enter into an agreement with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission for the use of the General Police Department facilities to provide training courses for the NRC personnel and contractors for a 1-year period and 4 12-month optional periods for the life of the 5-year contract for an amount payable for year 1 of $55,000 and the next 4 years of $50,000. Since you generate for contract period beginning April 1, 2021 through March 31st, 2026, for a total estimated amount not to exceed $255,000.
Any questions, comments concerning 7K? Well, that concludes our agenda items for Public Safety Committee. It is time for our park quarterly report. And we have the park chair with us this afternoon, Ms. Kay Baker. Ms. Baker, if you don't mind, come forward and present your report. Afternoon.
I assume you all received the quarterly report in your packet. I can go over it briefly, and then if you have any questions, I'd answer those questions. We are still meeting once a month, first Thursday of every month. In the quarter of January, February, and March of this year, we reviewed 36 cases involving, the report says 42, but my math may have been off. I think it might have been 41 officers. I break it down. Citizens or complaints and case reviews can come to the CPD by a citizen or an internal review. There are certain instances where sergeants will review behavior of their officers, and those generate what I've called in section 1B2, the internally generated complaints. That's what those are. So out of the 36 cases that we reviewed involving 42 officers, 26 of those were based on a citizen complaint that was submitted either to IA directly, a phone call, email. Those are all, and there is an app also where folks can submit complaints that way. So those are the ways that the CPD will get those complaints. So there were 26 citizen-generated complaints and 10 internally generated complaints. I broke down into from those categories in each of the cases where the chain of command, that's what COC stands for, chain of command, found at least one violation of a policy by one or more officers. Because a complaint could have 2 or more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 officers in the complaint. It can also identify multiple policies under consideration. So that's why the breakdown that's later on in the report on the number of complaints per category, the type of policy that's in question, there's more than 36, there's 50. So that's where that number comes from. In section E, the chief results. So the way the process works, after the complaints are reviewed or the cases are reviewed by internal affairs or chain of command, and the case gets presented to Park, and Park comes up with its recommendation, and there's 4 options, and they're in the ordinance. Then we submit it back to CPD. It undergoes a further review by deputy chief, and then it's seen, the case is reviewed by the chief Roddy. So his results don't come back as quickly as, like 2 weeks later or a week later. So there is some delay in us getting a neat package in the statistics. Okay, so that's why the statistics might seem a little off. But for purposes of this report, and it was provided to you in April, early April, there have been 73 cases in total reviewed by Park from October, which is when we first started reviewing cases, to the March meeting. And we've gotten reports or the results back from Chief Roddy in 36 of those. And Chief Roddy can speak to, if you have any questions on why cases might take longer than a week or 2 or 30 days even. to get the response back from him. And I know what those reasons are, and they're legitimate because of timing, and if an officer needs to have a hearing, you have to get all parties together with an appropriate date. It also takes time for the deputy chief and the chief to actually review the case. I mean, they don't just look at a piece of paper and decide what to do. They actually go through a process where they review reports and some of the videos as well. So that does take some time. As the report indicates, there were 4 cases where the park result, whether it be exonerated, sustained, not sustained, disagree with, or the chief's ultimate result didn't match, for lack of a better word. And there were 4 of those. The chief, when he issues his response and his result, he gives a reason for that, for his decision. And so those are known to the park committee. In section F, because in the first report that I did presented, which was October, November, December 2020, I believe it was Councilwoman Burrs was curious as to the categories of violations that we were seeing. And I had not done that in advance of that report. So I included October, November, December, just so you see, some of the categories that we reviewed. And then, but going forward, I'm only going to include the categories of violations that are specific to the period that we're talking about. On the second page, the January, February, March categories of violations, you'll see there seems to be more, but when I went through and started looking, the use of force policy has a lot of requirements and rules to be followed. And so I broke the use of force out into whether it was use of a gun, whether it was a physical use of force allegation, whether a taser was employed, whether it was a report violation. One instance, the officer left his taser at home and he was cited for that. So when you see use of force, I think a lot of people tend to immediately go to the worst case scenario. And I just want, it to be clear that there are multiple levels, especially in the use of force policy, where an officer might violate that. In category 2 or section 2 is where we list any concerns, policy recommendations, or requests that we might have. And that's based on, the cases that we've heard and maybe some concerns that we have based on equipment or results. And you'll see the first question was whether there was a system in place where the chief could issue the final results within a certain period of time, and a member throughout 60 days or 90 days. And subsequent to this report, I did happen to have a conversation with Captain Vaughn, and he kind of walked me through the reasons why it might not be as easy as demanding that the chief give us a result within 30 days or 60 days or even 90 days. And he can certainly speak to that, the specifics on the procedures that are in place within the CPD. Because once Park is done with the case, there's still work that needs to be done and is done through the Chattanooga Police Department. The other issue, and we raised this issue in the October, November, December report, it's about equipment. There are certain officers that aren't required by virtue of their assignment to have a body cam or a car cam, but they might on occasion be called to a case or a situation or an incident where an officer that was normally assigned to foot patrol, let's say, would have a body cam on. And I believe we had one of those cases in this time period. We must have, because we wouldn't have reported it as a concern. I do know that there is a cost associated with equipping every officer with a body cam and every car with a car cam. There's also maintenance that's involved in both of those pieces of equipment. And I'm sure Chief Roddy can speak to that if the council has any questions. I don't have any specific knowledge of that cost, what that cost would be. Any questions?
Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Franklin? Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Baker, thank you so much for leading this meeting. It's so important to the community, and I appreciate the level of professionalism that you bring to it. So I know we're early in the whole life cycle of this park, but I started looking at do we have any early trends that we're seeing, and I thought I want to make sure I understand in the columns, violations found by chain of command versus violations found by park. Am I to understand that a violation found by chain of command equals a difference of opinion or the opinion of Chief Roddy and the department? No.
No, ma'am. Good question, though. So the chain of command is the sergeant and the captain that supervises that officer. So that would be the chain of command. Internal chain of command does the investigations for certain classes of violations. Internal affairs will be the investigating division that handles the more serious violations in the policy manual. So when the chain of command, that's referring to what led up to Park having the case. So cases investigated either by chain of command or internal affairs. They issued their recommendation. Was there a violation of policy or was there not? And then the case comes to Park and the cases are presented to us and we review the paperwork and the videos, whatever we need to look at and watch. And then we issue our recommendation of was there a violation of policy or not. And there's 4 options of our actual, so we don't just say violation of policy, yes or no. The ordinance, we have 4 options. Sustained, meaning the allegation is supported by sufficient evidence. So that would mean, yes, there was a violation of policy. Not sustained, insufficient evidence, either to prove or disprove, no violation of policy. Exonerated, the incident complained of occurred but was lawful and proper, meaning the act occurred, but it was within policy. And then unfounded, the definition, these are all in our ordinance, so it's the allegation is false or not factual. So chain of command makes a recommendation, and that's part of the packet. Then Park reviews the cases and makes its recommendation, and then that's added to the packet. Then it goes back to the CPD, and my understanding is the deputy chief reviews, and his recommendation becomes part of the packet. And then Chief Roddy reviews the case, and he makes the final determination of whether there was a violation of policy or not. And then if there was a violation of policy, in his opinion, then he applies a discipline matrix, which dictates, is it verbal counseling? Is it a letter of reprimand? Is it 20-hour suspension, termination, whatever? Park does not, we don't get involved in the actual discipline because we don't make the ultimate decision on whether there's a violation of policy in the first place. We're part of that process. We are the citizen component of the process to give the chief, just some feedback from people who aren't police officers, but are lay people, and who live in each of the districts. So we cover the whole city.
So am I understanding correctly then that for all 36 cases that you reviewed, chain of command also reviewed those first?
Yes.
They review, then they hand to you. And so I'm just making sure I'm understanding. So for example, digital reporting rules, chain of command in their internal investigation determined that there was 1 complaint. They determined there was 1 violation, but you all found there were 2 violations within the same complaint?
Not necessarily. And I actually looked at this one because I was anticipating, it's like preparing for an oral argument for the Georgia Supreme Court. You don't really know what the questions are going to be, but you're trying to prepare, right? So in that, so there was a formal, and I use the word complaint, but please understand that the word complaint includes the citizen complaint, officer did X, and the internally generated concern by the police department themselves. I mean, they're policing each other is basically what's happening. So it's a case review, basically. There was 1 case that we looked at where it was alleged that the digital camera policy was violated. And chain of command said yes. We said yes, but there was another case that was brought by a citizen and he was alleging harassment. He was claiming he had been given too many tickets. Well, we exonerated the officer on too many tickets, but we realized in our review that the officer had not either uploaded his camera or turned it on or something like that. So Park added that as a violation to be reviewed. So that's why the columns, violations found by chain of command and violations found by Park, they match for the most part. But there are some where chain of command found a violation and we didn't. And vice versa, where chain of command didn't find a violation, but we did. Which I think speaks to their policing themselves, and we are allowed and authorized to add a violation if we see fit. Now, ultimately, like I said, our decision is just a recommendation that goes to the chief, and he ultimately decides in this particular case, was the officer required to have a body camera? And I don't know if that's the specific facts of that one, but I do know it was a body camera issue. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and there's, then your question about all officers having them on the opposed to potentially were tied together. But so 4 times Chief Roddy had a different result than what you all determined. Is there any transparency on that as this report evolves, or citizenry to know, here's the 4 things that our citizen review panel found that the chief of police didn't agree with?
In the form of what specifically?
What the differences of opinion were, what the case was. I just know we have a lot of citizens who, in as much as they are glad we have a citizen review board, desiring greater transparency. And so as this board evolves, as the park evolves, is that something you all have the capacity to be able to do within the law?
That probably be a question with the city attorney, because there are certain instances where if the case is not, well, I guess I'm going to give the chief to help on this one, because there's an open records request process. And so people are able to request certain documents through the city attorney's office and the CPD. I don't know if there's a prohibition against us giving general facts at this public forum. I don't have a problem with it. I did make a note of what they are, and
I guess I'm just thinking about in the spirit of why the city council decided to create the park in the first place, I think was to create a greater awareness and a feeling of transparency and our citizenry being a part of keeping our community safe. And so it's interesting that in reading this report, made assumptions about what I was seeing that was incorrect. Chain of command, I thought, well, perhaps that's city of Chattanooga. And so knowing that we're in this early stage, I would like us to consider, like your team to consider within the boundaries that you have, how we might make this even more friendly to the public. Because sure, there is such a thing as an open records law and a request, but goodness knows that adds layers and layers of difficulty for the public to get to information versus, if we make some of this as appropriate part of a quarterly report, I think people could find that.
I'd probably prefer the city attorney maybe weigh in, have a discussion about it.
Yeah, and perhaps that's a deeper conversation for another time.
Yeah.
I do thank you very much.
Thanks. Councilman Burke.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Ms. Hay, for the work that you and your team are doing. Definitely, we don't want to create a situation where it's like we're bashing or beating up on our police. We need you guys to respect you guys, and love the work that you're doing. But when we look at it, and we see where, say, conduct of the county, 2 complaints filed, violation found, I think there's 1, mark with 0. I think we had a situation here recently where an officer was a 15-second TikTok video where officer tackled a young man, and people didn't understand what happened before that video and how that young man assaulted someone. But then I asked the question that what was this guy's record? Or how was this guy, viewed as an officer? Or how was it, does this guy have a list of complaints longer than training school, and that information is not able to be received at that time. And I think although Parks is doing amazing work, we can see this at some point in time. I think it was Jimmy, like with the transparency of like what is happening with these officers or what is the outcome. After we find these violations, I even see where criminal offense bill, we got 1, 1, and 0. What happens next? Like, and I guess that would be Chief Ryder's report that comes up.
Well, what happens next is our recommendation just becomes part of the packet and goes back to CPD.
Yes, ma'am.
And the deputy chief reviews it, makes his recommendation, and then ultimately Chief Roddy reviews it and makes a recommendation.
Exactly.
And the complicating factor, possibly in some of these cases, although I think they have is if there is civil action or possible criminal cases generated as a result of some of these complaints and case reviews. So if there is, then it may not be able to be reported publicly through PARC because there is already a process in place in the criminal system or the federal civil court. So, you're talking about a lot of factors that go into this whole process.
A lot.
And, we found, PARC found no violations
Right.
in some of these where the chain of command was harder on their officers than even we felt like they should have been.
And if I may,
Yeah.
to this body, I do agree that our police department is a very top-notch police department. I understand that we are not some of the places that we see on TV, things that are going on in some of the other communities. But I do understand the heightness and the tension that's going on in our world today. And it seems like if we're not careful, if we don't be proactive in a lot of situations, to give PARC the resources they need to make sure that we're more transparent with our constituents. I think we need to figure out, as we build on this, how that looks, but not also disarming our police department, because our police department needs to be able to do their job as well. But one infraction can happen, and our city will garner like a lot of these other cities, and we'll be sitting up here trying to figure out why our whole entire city is in turmoil because we weren't proactive in a lot of situations and making things as transparent as possible and making things as clear as possible to our community because they don't trust us and they don't trust the police department. And I think we need to figure out a better way to also build this so we can gain that trust from our community and from our police that we're working together. So thank you for your support.
And I checked with Chief Roddy on those 4. He doesn't have a problem because it sounds like they've all resolved in reporting the disagreement and his ultimate decision. He'd like to hear that. I know we're short on, and we could be short on time. But he is here to answer.
Can you put that in the report and send it to the council? So we can have it.
Are you talking to me or?
I was talking chief, can you just put that in those 4 instances in the report, send it to council?
I can, if the council will indulge me with 2 minutes, I can explain all 4, and I can actually tell you how we document it so that it's on record. If that would help.
Council, you good?
I like that.
Start the time. I will move quickly. Thank you.
2 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. The way that we work, if I have a differing opinion of the recommendations supplied by PARC, on every single one of those instances, I supply a letter into the master case file that explains why my decision differs from their recommendation. Those letters are part of the actual public record on each one of those. If that case reaches a final disposition with no pending litigation, then that is open to any FOIA. So as a matter of record, it would help clarify for council for any quarterly park report. Chairman Baker is amenable to it, just include my letters with the report. That way, if there's any questions relative to each individual incident, you have my documentation as to my reasons why. On each one of those 4 instances, we will be judged in a moment. I know that goes towards one time, Councilman. But one of the first instances was relative to a use of force violation. It was not based on whether an improper investigation or improper stop had occurred. An in-car camera system was not working at the time of the stop, just body-worn camera. And the park moved into a conversation of whether the stop was justified. The stop itself was not the matter of the complaint, and there was no evidence to show that the stop was not justified. So while park recommended its sustainment for the stop being improper, I did not sustain that because there was no evidence to show that it was improper. There was simply an absence of video. The complaint was relative to the use of force, and the use of force was found by both park and myself to not be sustained. And the second allegation, we had one officer that received 2 allegations, one for public ridicule, criticism, and the other one for unsatisfactory conduct. Basically, it was a lesser included offense. Both allegations were addressing the same conduct. I felt that was a bit of a double hit on an officer. If he was going to receive a sustained allegation, it should be for one. I sustained the public ridicule and criticism because it had to do with some social media postings, and it actually fit the letter of what the allegation was better than unsatisfactory conduct, which I not sustained. Third one was an officer, a 19-year veteran that had received a discourtesy and a body-worn camera violation. He did lose a bit of patience, not profanity-wise, but he lost his patience on the call of complainant. And in the original allegation, he was shown to be in violation of not turning on the body-worn camera. At the disciplinary review hearing, it was found that the actual body-worn camera was found. It had simply just been tagged, and it wasn't part of the investigation. We reviewed the body-worn camera footage. I did sustain the discourtesy. I believe I gave him a letter of counseling, did not sustain the body-worn camera violation because he did have it on. We just simply didn't find the video until the day it was DRH. That information would have not been privy to Parks review because we had not found it at that time. Incidentally, I requested that officer, if he would, of his own volition, go out and speak with the complainant after the DRH to talk it out. He sent me an email afterwards that he took my words to heart, went out there and spoke with the complainant. They shook hands. The entire thing was settled right there between 2 grown-ups. And the last situation was 2 individual officers that did lose their patience. It resulted in a discourtesy allegation by individuals on the call. However, what they lost their patience over was the individuals on the call were using an inordinate amount of racial slurs towards another person on the complainant. And the 2 officers didn't have a lot of tolerance for that. Now, their word choice was poor, but their emotions, I believe in it. So instead of sustaining the allegation, I sat down with both the officers myself. We watched the body-worn camera. We talked about the perils of losing your temper in the heat of the moment. But I did tell them that I understood their whys for getting upset. But we have an obligation to conduct ourselves at a higher level. So I did not sustain it, but I took it as a coaching moment between 2 younger officers. Hopefully they'll not see them again in that situation. So those are the 4. Parks input is always welcome. I absolutely look forward to reading their recommendations because it helps me get to the end. But sometimes we're not going to agree because sometimes I have more information provided to me than that. I know that was over 2 minutes. You can deduct it from my points.
Councilman Byrd, you got any further questions? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Hester.
I'm gonna go over my head. I want to thank you, Bart, and applaud your effort, Chief. Thank you. I think the streets are safe. Right, since you became Chief. But I will speak to you after the meeting. Thanks.
Any other questions? Before we adjourn from the second meeting? I see any other hands. Ms. Baker, I certainly agree with my colleagues up here. You do bring professionalism to this board, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being with that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, at this time, we will adjourn Public Works, Public Safety. We are approaching the 5 o'clock hour with 2 more committees. At this time, I will turn the chair over to our Budget and Finance Chairwoman, Councilwoman Burke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Did Kay already leave? Kay, my friend, fabulous. All right, call the Budget and Finance Committee To order, may I have a quick minutes?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. A couple of quick things. before we go. I think we can move this fairly quickly. Mr. Chair, there has been a request for the pay plan presentation, and I would like that scheduled. Just whenever.
Let me get the administration to see when they get the presentation, maybe in the weeks.
Sure, Joda, it's this study, it's a PowerPoint, and council has requested to see it, and if you stay up there for just a minute, because for the second thing I'm going to say. So the second thing I'm going to say, Mr. Chair, is the budget timeline has changed. We probably won't see the budget until August at the earliest. Therefore, we're going to need a continuing resolution, which I will leave to the administration to put on the agenda, but it is going to go on the agenda. It's something that they bring up. They don't need our approval for that. That being said, and since we have more time to get us all educated, anytime between now and say July 1st, it would be fine for the pay plan study to just educate and re-educate us on the pay plan, because it'll be part of the budget.
Yes, Councilman, we will go ahead and get that scheduled. I'll get with Daisy and make sure that we get that on the calendar for the appropriate committee. And then, yes, on the continuance, we are planning on getting that continuance to you as quickly as we can through the normal process. That would continue the fiscal year's budget. And then we will intend on getting you a budget by August, at which time you will have the opportunity to have hearings, and it will go to you for approval.
Thank you very much. And for the council's knowledge, we will follow the regular procedure. We will have public hearings. We will educate the council. We will do everything we always do so that it's a proper checks and balance. It's just not going to happen until August or a little later.
That's correct. We appreciate your patience.
Okay, thank you very much. The other thing very quickly, Mr. Chair, is I would like permission to go forward with a contract, and let me tell you what that is. For a long time, the council has asked for help in research and looking at best practices and questions, and we do not have and decided to not have a full-time research person on staff. Rather, we have $100,000 in our budget for us to use to get ourselves up to snuff independently on various issues. As you know, I've been talking to UTC to come up with a proper agreement, their political science department, economics department, etc., so that anytime we want research or we want help that's independent of internal here, we can do that. With council's permission to go forward with that, I would like to do that and then bring something to the council for approval. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, but this is something council's been working on.
Mr. Attorney, have you got a contract put together for us to look at this point?
No, sir, I was not requested to do a contract.
I can tell you what it is. First of all, I would have been out of order to request a contract until the council would do it. That would have been inappropriate. I would like for this contract to be on the agenda, if approved. And then we're talking about an as-needed contract for independent research and research assistance. And we will work out the details. Phil and I have already spoken. He's told me what needs to be in the contract. And I think it would have been inappropriate for me to do any more without council's permission.
So you are asking the council to put a contract with the UTC on the 2-week agenda?
Yes.
Is that correct?
And that's the purpose for it. It's to meet the need that council has identified for a long time.
Consultation. Is there any objection to placing this on the 2-week agenda, or is this something that you would like to put in committee for further discussion?
One thing I'll just highlight, I did get a note about this prior, is that this may work better as an interlocal agreement, given that the university is a state agency, but it is up to you as to how you construct that.
Well, as I've gotten the best information, and it seems to me.
And that's obviously up to the city.
Yeah, the cleanest way to do it is just for us to contract independently. What the contract's looking for now, well, real quickly, it's an as-needed contract up to about $47,000. We've got 100, it doesn't in any way use up the money we've got. With an as-needed contract, it's based on as we need it, so we may not spend anything, I don't know. It's gonna be y'all calling the shots on what you need more research on independently. And I've got direction from Phil what it needs to look like. I've spoken with the university. I just think I need appropriate approval before I have the right to go.
And we have been in contact with municipal technical advisory service folks this afternoon, and talking with them regarding the method for this. And the method is a contract with professional services under TCA 12-4107. That authorization is not just specific to attorneys. There is a specific provision that is there that would authorize that for educational services, which would be requested here. That's one of the reasons we made those contacts, and we are also going to have some sort of letter that comes back from the folks at UTC as to how they can provide those services, and we'll work with them to get that done.
Great.
Yes.
So do I have permission to go further, or do people want to discuss it?
Council, any objection to placing this on the 2-week agenda? It is a resolution. Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I don't have any objection moving forward. I think my question would be more along the lines of the wording of the contract and what it is that we would be looking at. I would rather that the council have an opportunity to review that prior to it being on the agenda for a vote. My opinion on that one. We all have legislation that we've introduced. It's gone through committee for a reason. That's usually to just review the language, not to debate whether or not it's a good idea, but to ensure that everybody's comfortable with the language and answer questions prior to it being on the agenda.
I think that's a great idea. We already have the basic wording and the see that it's circulated with nothing else. Not a problem.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, is this something that you would like to look at in the legislative committee, or you just want to look at next week to see if we want to put it into?
I think it should be done just like all our other legislation.
Okay.
Sure, I can get that to, would you like me to forward all the wording and everything? It's an expense, so you, Chair, you put it in budget. I'm happy to do all the work and then forward it to legislative committee.
Well, why don't we go that route?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing this up. I know this is something that the council has talked about for, I don't know, 6, 7 years now, maybe. So it'd be great to have something in place to be able to assist us. So thank you very
We'll
much.
get the wording done within the week and get it to you, get all the basics. The one thing we need for this is a letter from UTC. We're getting the wording now saying what they're going to do. And then I'll give it to you.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So the other two things that were important to everyone had to do with use of council district reimbursement funds, use of funds in relation to furniture purchases. And is Daisy here? She was gonna make the, you gonna do it?
She should be on the Zoom.
On the screen? Okay, well, could we bring it for Daisy? You have in your folders the council budget. You have in your folders what you have spent thus far. That's pretty clear. Right now, we have, council gets $54,000, $6,000 a piece. It's not really truly discretionary. It's reimbursement funds. And the questions have been, what can it be used for? And so that's been the main question. Most of us have not used any funds. I got the report for you. Most of you guys have not used any funds because we haven't been active because of COVID. So if you could bring Daisy in, please. So Daisy, I know that council funds can be used for any legitimate council expense. I think the questions have more been, what does that look like? And what's the process for doing that? Particularly when it comes to furniture or what you would call capital funds as opposed to things that are used up a lot. So if you was go give a brief overview of what that needs to look like, and then I'm sure we have council questions, and Mr. Chair, you're gonna have to build that since I didn't see that. Casey?
Yeah, yes, Councilwoman. With respect to your budgets or the council budget, it really operates primarily the same as any other departmental budget. And that is, once those funds are appropriated by you, the council, then they are available for use for any legitimate public purpose. As such, though, however, just as it is with any other department, with certain controls in place that allow for a certain line of authority in expensing those funds. I.e., for departments, we have department heads that must sign off on every expenditure. And for council, of course, that would be the council chair. With respect to, there are specific guidelines, however, regarding certain special type expenditures, if you will, with respect to agencies and capital. Agency appropriations are those dollars that are awarded to entities that are separate and apart from the city, nonprofit type organizations. With respect to those agencies, TCA specifically requires that a public process be followed. They must be publicized in an ordinance, and the agencies must meet certain criteria in terms of the documentation that is to be presented. So no department administrators nor council is authorized to make dollars or make disbursements on behalf of agencies without having first followed that process, which is essentially a budget amendment that requires 2 public readings as well as a public hearing. And I think that's in general what is required. As this council, you are authorized to make expenditures under the same internal control process, which requires proper approvals, compliance with state law, and special attention with respect to agency appropriations. Now, as far as capital is concerned, there again, capital appropriations are generally made as part of the capital budget ordinance, but of course there are capital expenditures that do not meet the criteria for a capital budget, which is $50,000 or less. And to the extent that your budget has funds to absorb those kinds of expenditures, and I believe your budget did for FY20. In fact, I think you had $45,000, $46,000 allocated to capital, all of which, however, is spent. In fact, even more than was initially allocated. So in general, have any other questions regarding that?
I used the example with Daisy, if I want to buy a desk, can I buy a desk in my office? As long as I have the money within my $6,000. She said, if I go out and buy it independently, the city won't reimburse sales tax. The city doesn't pay sales tax. If I buy it and get reimbursed for it, the city funds, that desk stays with the city. It becomes property of the city because it was bought with city funds. Otherwise, I could go through purchasing to get it, the same result. I go through purchasing, I get the desk, but it still becomes property of the city. I think that was one of the questions that we had. We pretty much have carte blanche to spend our undesignated funds however we wish, which is what we've been doing. However, I really am thankful for the questions I've been getting from council on the specifics, because that pretty much pins it down. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Councilwoman, I'm not seeing any hands, but I do have a question, if I understood you correctly. And I'm gonna go back to your illustration about this. If I wanted a desk for my office, I could go purchase it, but it would still come out of my expenses. Is that correct? Okay.
We have very little leeway in our budget, and the leeway we have really blows down to the $6,000 a person.
Yeah.
Or the money that we use to get consultancies. That's the way we set it up. We can change it however we want, and if you think it's necessary, if any council people think, we're in charge of it. If somebody would like to sit down and work out, redoing our budget, changing it, and we can't touch the personnel and operations stuff. So you're talking about maybe $160,000 total, and you know how we're spending that.
Councilwoman Hill?
When we have questions, and we certainly will, who do we address our specific questions to about the process for reimbursement for working with city purchasing, et cetera?
Karen is the one that does our purchasing reimbursement when you turn in your form, and she can.
So there's a form, so all of that, we go to Karen to find out.
We have all of that. You haven't had the privilege, unfortunately, of going through all that orientation and seeing that, but all of that's in place. And Karen, if you need to know now, she's really good at that, and can show it. And the form you fill in, you have to give receipts. It has to be a proper usage, it's signed off by the chair. It's turned into finance, and you get the reimbursement.
Well, this really speaks to, I think, almost every council member has mentioned how they would like to have an improved orientation process for council members, but I think we all get so busy as soon as we start doing the work that by the time you learn it, you've forgotten what you want in the orientation process. Maybe I'll get that on the list somewhere and get to it in 3.5 years.
Okay,
We'll
yeah.
see.
Good question. Anything else about reimbursement, that sort of thing? The last thing you asked about was COVID funding accounting, and you have in your packets a full COVID funding accounting. We've spent about, now COVID funding comes from a lot of different places. IBD does some, but you're talking about from the general budget. We spent about $9 million, I'm rounding these off. We spent about $9 million, we've been reimbursed for all but about, I don't know, 3 million, and these figures change as we go. We have every reason to believe we're going to be fully reimbursed. There's no one that will begrudge what we have spent. If you have other questions or concerns, that's what we can deal with now. And Jonah, if you want to respond to any of this. Does anybody have any questions?
The only thing I'll say is that I think after going through some of this with Daisy, about 35, everything but 35% of our COVID spending has been reimbursed, and we feel confident that we're going to be reimbursed, and it shouldn't interrupt our spending during an emergency.
Madam Chair, I've got a question.
Sure.
So before we, and I know that we were looking at some expenditures here just the other day. Before we start with those expenditures, and one of them was to United Way, I would like to see the budget made whole. Just as we did
that's cool.
prior to that.
I'm sorry, you'd like to see what?
The budget made whole. In other words, we reimburse ourselves for anything that we potentially were in the hole. And I think I heard Councilman Burr say that we're about 3 million.
I'm not sure the exact amount, Daisy, you may be able to provide some more specifics on that.
Yeah, right now, we have spent unanticipated or unbudgeted dollars, if you will, about $3 million that have not been reimbursed. However, we are continuing, they are COVID related. That is why we earmarked them as such since the COVID began. As dollars are becoming available from the federal government and other places, they are making those grants and awards retroactive, if you will, for expenditures that occurred since March. So these dollars, we have already identified about $40,000 that have been presented to the respective agency and determined to be eligible for reimbursement. So of that 3.3 million that we spent without a funding source other than ourselves, of course, we've already identified $400,000 of it. So, and it is anticipated and expected that with the FEMA grant that is being requested for approval here, that even more of those dollars will qualify. So the idea and the expectation, and it is really not an unreasonable expectation in this environment, is that, and the federal government is really trying to make sure that all of our COVID-related expenditures are handled and or reimbursed. But, you know, can I guarantee that? I can't guarantee that. But we are, by way of Chelsea, we have people that are working specifically on that with the federal grants as it relates to items as we spend them going forward and those that we've already spent retro.
I know our finance team is working very hard to make sure that we are reimbursed as quickly as possible. But like I said, again, given the nature of this pandemic, we want to make sure that we have the flexibility to spend where possible. We don't think that the rate at which we've been reimbursed is anything to be alarmed by. I think, again, we've over 65 or just about 65% of the money that we've spent so far has been reimbursed. And so we feel pretty confident.
I think this council is never approached to set and behind all the flexibility in the world. What I've heard from council is please don't spend money that's not, and you can kind of relate everything to COVID because COVID took, okay. There were several rather large requests that we felt were unnecessary, that these agencies have reserves bigger than ours sometimes, and that perhaps we should reimburse ourselves first. And so was that your concern?
It is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So.
I understand.
Okay. Was that fast enough, Mr. Chair? We covered everything council asked for.
You did great.
Okay, I'm done.
All right, at this time, we're going to turn the chair over to Councilman Ledford for planning and zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome everyone to Planning and Zoning Committee for Tuesday, May the 4th be with you. If I can give a motion to approve our minutes.
So moved.
All right, thank you. No objection, minutes will stand. Mr. Bridger, you're on deck. Are you ready to go?
I got my 30-minute presentation ready, but
No, sir, not today. You're gonna have to put that one in the back pocket.
okay,
After another time. So we're gonna go ahead and move in with ordinances on final reading, number 5A. And John, no need for a presentation on this. I will ask Councilman Hester, are you good for a final reading, sir? All right, moving on then to next week, Tuesday, May 11th. Ordinances on first reading, and this one will tee up Councilman Hester as well. John, you want to go ahead and give us
I'll give you a quick overview.
quick overview on 60, please.
Yeah, this was deferred by our Councilman Gilbert, right after the applicant to meet with the residents had some questions about access, and I know the applicants here I think also provided Councilman Hester your contact info so that the applicant can reach out to you. But just know the staff and planning commission both recommend to approve with some conditions. There was an opposition at planning commission. I think there may have been communication at the planning commission noting some questions. So should the applicant can kind of inform me what the latest is on that, but just know this one with the recommendation from staff and PCs to approve with conditions. And I'll be happy to kind of briefly go over the conditions if you like. Okay. Basically, planning commission is recommending
4 conditions. Again, this is for RTZ zoning request. It's going to be basically a small lot, single family residential subdivision. Those 4 conditions are provide a minimum of 7 acres of undisturbed open space, a maximum density of 5 dwelling units per acre. That's consistent with the plan recommendation of limit the density of 5 dwelling units per acre. Single family residential uses only. And the 4th and final condition is to provide internal pathways throughout the development to connect it to the South Chickamauga Creek Greenway, subject to the city of Chattanooga approval. Those are the 4 conditions that would go with that rezoning.
Very good. John, I do see the applicant in the audience, and I would strongly, just with a head nod, are we working on that meeting? Because I have in my notes, there was just a head nod, all I need, Mr. Price.
We try.
You tried, okay, okay. So I'm going to get, I will get with Councilman Hester and discuss some strategies to make sure that communication has every chance to happen before first reading next week. Fair enough? Fair enough. Fair enough, thank you, sir. John, let's move on to 6C.
Yes, sir. This is a request to rezone a piece of property from R1 residential to C2 for a proposed gas station, car wash and convenience store. This is located up in the northern edge of Chattanooga, in the Uwall area next to where Cambridge Square is. This is just to the west of that development. Staff reviewed the request, recommended UGC. It's kind of more of a village-like zone. That was the reason for the request, is recommended by the plan for the area. At planning commission, there was no opposition. After hearing from the applicant still would like to go to C2. Planning commission recommended to approve the applicant's request of C2 with some conditions that would limit the use to convenience store, gas station and car wash.
Very good. Councilwoman Burr?
I don't need anything else. I'm good.
I figured you were covered a lot of ground there. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
6D.
This is a request to rezone to the Highland Park community in Councilman Penrod's district to rezone a piece of property next to the Lucy Boiler site from R1 to UGC for a proposed 6-unit townhouse development. Again, just give you some review of that. Staff recommended approval of RTZ instead of UGC, and the reason for that was RTZ allows you to do multi-unit, but limits it to 4 units per lot. The applicant wanted to do 6 units per lot. At planning commission, there was no opposition. After hearing staff's recommendation and comments from the applicant, planning commission recommended to approve the UGC with conditions. And so that's the question.
We go ahead and review those conditions. And
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman at her desk, yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second. Pull that up.
But I have discussed with her, I know she's a favorable conditional.
Okay, I may need, this is where I may need to pull up the, I may have it on time. Screenshot of that. Screenshot for everything there. 1 second. Okay, Bill, would you mind reading it through record? Thank you.
Sure. The conditions are townhouse use only, height limited to 35 feet, parking to be located to the side or rear of the property, limited to 1 curb cut onto South Greenwood Avenue, and for the unit fronting South Greenwood Avenue entrances and facade to be oriented towards South Greenwood Avenue.
John, we're going to move on into resolutions.
Yes, sir.
We have 1 planning item in my district.
Yeah, H and I go together.
Yes, sir. And real quick, while we have it, we've got a lot of time, Chairman. Will you explain real quick though for
Yes,
our new colleagues why we abandoned the PUD first and then bring in a new one?
As part of the nature of the process, because if there's ever an existing PUD, before you can approve a new special permit, you have to abandon the older one. So that's why you have these 2 resolutions together. We try to do one before the other. So that way this follows the process for that. And again, this is one of the 2 cases where we do have a site plan attached to the zone for our planning development. And just a quick note on that, it's second here. This is basically a 48-acre site, proposing a mix of 203 single family, 24 townhouses right next to Heritage Park. It's really good development. It's consistent with the policy recommendations of the plan in terms of density, connects to Heritage Park. So people who live there will be able to access the nearby park. So staff recommend approval because it's consistent with the policy. At planning commission, it's noted there's opposition, but actually what there were folks there were asking questions about basically the maintenance of the buffer areas, and those questions were addressed at planning commission. So both the planning commission and staff recommend approval. I will note that there may be a small amendment to the map area. We were notified by the applicant that they may need to do a small adjustment to the boundary to make sure it's accurate. So I sent an email to them. I copied Councilman Ledford to basically send Phil and I a copy of that revised map, just so we can make sure it's not significant change before it gets on y'all's agenda next week. So we'll be expecting that email from the applicant. Once Phil and I have had a chance to review it, we'll kind of confirm that we're all still good to go.
Very good. I appreciate that effort and getting that copy to you and city attorney to make sure that's a minor modification and does not require a walkthrough. I don't wish to do that, and I don't think the applicant does as well. Let me just real quick point out, this was done very well. This was an online community meeting. Lasted about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And very good presentation, very good attendance from the neighborhood, even in a virtual environment. And I was very pleased with the work that's being done out there on this particular project and providing a really wonderful place. I go through their lots to try to see how it's developing, and people are walking around already in the middle of the construction zone, lots of houses going up. And we're working also with some infrastructure improvements, and I appreciate the applicant, or the engineers and developers working with me on fulfilling some of those items that came out of earlier community meetings. Mr. Chairman, I will close us out.
Councilman, well, thank you. John, I do
Yes,
have one other item. And I don't know who or how we coordinate with GIS, but resident over in Hill City noticed that one of our case number 2020-1027, that's 111 Bush Street, is listed as ERA3, and that should be ERD2. That's what was approved at council.
What was the case number again?
2020-0127.
127. Okay, the address 111.
111 Bush Street. The applicant had requested that ERA3 would be approved.
ERD2. I'll say what, yeah.
Thank you. Council, it is on the 5:30 hour, and I've talked to the city attorney. I believe next week we may have a little more time to address his need. We do need a break before the 6 o'clock hour, so we'll just schedule our attorney-client privilege for next week, Mr. Attorney.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So if there's nothing else to come before the council at this time, we are adjourned at 6 o'clock.
Sorry, guys, stretch. Long car ride. Yeah, you go. A long car ride. Yeah. Yeah, but not all of them like y'all. Hey. Lady. Oh, yeah, y'all are getting crushed, I'm sure, right now, trying to. Yeah, right now it's just drinking the car. Especially if you start working, you know, really, yeah. I just did that.
So we got a project that all this. They wouldn't get, yeah, but they wouldn't give us an answer. I mean, call, email. No, I mean, don't give us an answer. So Friday. Hey, Bruce. Fine, fine. Do we know? How you are?